Let's get into today's video since there is a lot of things to actually cover, and this one is actually going to be a fairly long one, so sit back, relax, and watch me ramble on about all the news articles that are currently floating around the internet. So without further ado, let's actually start today's episode. First of all, I want to talk about Mixer because Mixer is officially closing, and there is a lot to be said about Mixer. Now, you may actually be unfamiliar with Mixer just due to the fact that it is fairly new and it's not as popular as some of its competitors out there on the internet. And if you don't know anything about Mixer, it's pretty much a live streaming service owned by Microsoft, and it's exactly the same as things like YouTube Gaming, Facebook Gaming, and of course Twitch, where you basically go onto Mixer and live stream yourself playing video games. That's practically what it was known for, but unfortunately it never gained as much popularity as things like Twitch, YouTube Gaming, Facebook Gaming, unfortunately. And Mixer hasn't been around for all that long. It actually came out in 2017, so you can see it is really new to the streaming game, of course. And there is a lot to be said about Mixer shutting down just due to the fact that they did make two of the biggest gaming deals of all time, and they practically had two of the biggest streamers of all time on the Mixer platform. I'm talking about, of course, Ninja and Shroud. Ninja and Shroud were both on Mixer, and they got paid a lot to go from Twitch over to Mixer. I'm talking about millions and millions of dollars for their contract, so it would make sense they would move over from somewhere like Twitch over to Mixer. But unfortunately, even though with two of the biggest streamers on the internet currently, it's just unfortunate that Mixer really couldn't hold its own. But it does make sense because the streaming platform game is already pretty full as we speak. Of course, we got things like Twitch, we got things like Facebook Gaming, YouTube Gaming, and I'm sure there's other platforms on the internet that are much less popular than all those other websites as well. So you can see the market for live streaming is just very crowded, and when you enter the market at such a late time in the game, it's almost like there's no way you're going to be able to catch up with things like Twitch. If you look at Twitch and how Twitch is doing, Twitch keeps getting millions, if not billions of views each and every day and each and every month when it comes to their streaming platform. And it really does show how much momentum Twitch really does have, just due to the fact that they don't even need people like Ninja or Shroud even on their platform, and they're still pulling in millions, if not billions of views each and every day when it actually comes to their platform. But then again, Twitch is already an established brand, so it is going to be hard to pull people from a brand that they already associate themselves with and has been around for so long, and people are so used to Twitch. Why would you ever want to move over to things like Mixer? A lot of people honestly also probably never heard of Mixer. On top of that, they don't have too many big people on Mixer besides Ninja and Shroud. I'm sure there's other people on Mixer, don't get me wrong, but just due to the fact that Twitch already has much more of a fan base, they have more people on their website. Your favorite streamer most likely is streaming on Twitch because Twitch is the streaming leader when it comes to video game streaming. So of course, most likely you're going to go to Twitch. And when it comes to features, without a doubt, something that really does help Twitch to begin with is the fact that they have the most features of any streaming service. They really know how to treat their streamers right. They really know how to help their streamers make Twitch a reality and a full-time career, if you really want to make Twitch a full-time career. And I think that's really hard to beat when all these other companies like for instance Microsoft with Mixer don't really know how to do that, as well as something like Twitch. Of course, they're much more newer. Just a whole bunch of things pretty much killed off Mixer to begin with, and that's not really great news because I know a lot of people's lives are at stake when it comes to Mixer. A lot of people probably work there, a lot of people stream there, and a lot of people are pretty disappointed that now they're pretty much being forced out of their home, if you can say, because a lot of people have been streaming on Mixer for a little while now, so it is unfortunate. Basically, what's going to happen with the Mixer shutdown, basically what's going on is they're going to move everybody to Facebook Gaming. It makes sense that they want to move everybody to Facebook Gaming instead of like Twitch or YouTube Gaming because, first of all, Facebook Gaming is not that big, so they probably kind of want to help Facebook Gaming out by trying to move people over there from their platform to a platform that's not as big as something like Twitch or YouTube Gaming. And then second of all, I keep hearing things about like their integrated cloud service like xCloud. I do know they do own xCloud, which is pretty much just like Google the Google streaming service that recently came out last year. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but basically what they want to do is they always wanted to integrate that with their own Mixer platform, but of course that's no longer a thing. So by moving over to something like Facebook Gaming, it should help them actually integrate something like their own xCloud inside of Facebook Gaming. Of course, Facebook Gaming's not that big, and Facebook's probably going to allow them to do something like that since they don't care, and they're really trying to help their brand in any way they can. Of course, also Facebook Gaming is known just like Microsoft's Mixer to actually try to bring over big content creators like Ninja and other people to their platform by making these big crazy deals, of course. But apparently also a lot of these other streamers like Ninja, Shroud, and some other people have been actually asked by Facebook Gaming if they would like to go to Facebook Gaming over from Mixer or over from Twitch, and a lot of them actually apparently aren't happy about how Mixer just randomly shut down and they're forced to go somewhere else. So I can see why you wouldn't want to go from a website like Mixer over to something like Facebook Gaming, since you probably had no idea Mixer was going to shut down. They probably just did it last second. Now, apparently, from what I heard, Mixer is not just going to shut down randomly. They're actually going to give all their employees and everybody who streams on Mixer a little wake up call, so you're not just going to be shut down tomorrow. Basically what's happening is they are going to shut down Mixer at the end of July, so they are shutting it down July 22nd. So you can see, give or take a little bit, you are pretty much going to have about a month before Mixer is officially closed, which is actually kind of sad because who would have thought Mixer would actually close? But it makes sense. It's really hard to start a brand new website, especially when it's based on other types of media, whether it's social media, whether it's streaming, whether it's video content on the internet. There's already other established websites on the internet. It's almost like, why even start one in the first one when most likely you are going to be losing millions and millions of views a month to other websites? So it practically makes no sense. But it's interesting they did actually decide to chop Mixer in the long run. So RIP Mixer, and I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised about this, because let's face it, this thing was just pretty much a dying breed, and let's face it, it wasn't racking in as much money as Twitch to begin with. I think the real reason is they just started the game a little bit too late. But what I will say though, even though they were a competitor to things like Twitch, to things like YouTube Gaming, what I can actually say here is I can safely say they did do a pretty good job at their own Mixer website. I actually heard in some instances their video quality was absolutely great on that website, and then on top of that, I actually heard the latency for when you actually talk to your chat and things like that can actually be, or in some cases was actually better than Twitch or YouTube Gaming, believe it or not. So that's one thing, they actually had a leg up over the competition. They really prioritized, I do believe, the fact that latency was their number one thing. As you guys know, if you stream on websites like YouTube Gaming, Twitch, for live streaming, you guys know usually there is some kind of latency no matter whether you like it or not, and no matter what type of internet you actually pay for, even if you pay for amazing internet, which is kind of unfortunate, and I don't know why that is, but apparently that's one thing Mixer always had a leg up on. But even so, I guess people just weren't interested in Mixer. There's just so many reasons why this thing actually shut down. We'll never know, I guess, maybe the real reason. There's a lot of things why this thing may have shut down, but it is interesting, and people are being forced out of there. So let's go into the next story here, because we do have more articles to cover, of course. The next one is actually rumors about the upcoming Samsung Galaxy Fold 2, because without a doubt, most likely what Samsung is actually going to do, of course, Samsung is actually going to be making a Samsung Galaxy Fold 2. It makes sense. There's no reason not to make a Galaxy Fold 2, because these folding phones are still a fairly new concept. The first folding phones came out last year. A lot of them aren't even being developed. from big companies like Apple. Apple hasn't even started making their own folding phone. Folding phones don't know what they truly want to be. We have things like the Galaxy Z Flip, and then we have the Galaxy Fold, which if you look at both the Fold and the Flip, they're both so different when it comes to how they actually want to fold the phone. One looks more like a traditional smartphone, just flipped in half with the Z Flip, and then with the Galaxy Fold, it's pretty much more of a phone trying to be a tablet. In that aspect, and it looks like they are going to be continuing from what I'm reading the Galaxy Fold line. We are going to be getting the Galaxy Fold 2, and there is more rumors and speculations on the internet about what the next Galaxy Fold 2 could actually be. And let's go ahead and look at these, because there is something very interesting about how they're actually wanting to actually make this phone. Now keep in mind, of course, these are only rumors and speculations. This does not mean that this is actually going to be the final product when this thing actually comes out. And apparently from this leak right here, from what we're actually looking at, it looks like there's going to be something very interesting about this phone. If this rumor is actually real, this might be pretty big devastating blow to the Fold 2, just due to the fact that a lot of people's biggest complaint with the Fold 1 was the fact that the outside screen was super tiny, and it was not even that comfortable to use it as a regular phone. Most likely, most of the time, you wanted the original Fold folded out so you can get a bigger screen. It actually had a smaller screen on the outside compared to a regular smartphone, which is kind of inconvenient and kind of unfortunate for that phone when you really wanted two beautiful screens on it. It was more about the folding aspect of the phone. And if we look at these renders and these leaks and these rumors of the upcoming Fold 2, what do we see right here? We see the outside of the device, and the outside of this device does not look promising at all, to be honest. You look at the outside of this device, and basically what you're seeing here is a really small, tiny strip of a screen on the front of the device, and it actually obviously looks worse than the Fold 1. So let's hope this is not the final build of it. And honestly, I don't see why Samsung would want to make a super small, tiny OLED screen, or whatever the case may be, on the front of the device like that. It just doesn't make sense. It really does seem like the Fold 2 would be a pretty big downgrade in that aspect. If you're trying to use it as a regular day-to-day phone, then it would almost give you no reason to never look at the front of the device. You would always want to open up the display of the device, and that's really the biggest thing here. As you can see, the design right here is it has one small strip of a thing. So what are you supposed to do with that? Like get notifications or get like scrolling text on there, like your bulletin points, like maybe your messages and stuff like that. I can just see that not being practical. I don't know why that would even be a thing, because look how much unused space the Fold 2 would actually have if they actually did this. And I can see no reason why Samsung would actually want to do this. But hey, there could be a reason for this, but let's pray this is not it. Because honestly, for me personally, if I was a person going out right now to go buy the Fold 2 and this was the final design of it, it would kind of not make me too happy to buy a phone that's supposed to be used as a phone. But how can you really use it as a traditional phone when the main screen on the outside is a very small screen? So this is just a very weird thing. I almost want to say I don't actually believe this leak and this rumor to actually be true, just due to the fact that it just looks really bizarre, and it pretty much gives the outside screen almost no practicality outside of like maybe little notifications, scrolling text, and things like that. It almost really does seem like a useless display. It kind of reminds me of that display on the Galaxy Z Flip, where it was practically unusable outside of folding it. If you didn't unfold it, it was pretty much useless and pointless at this very time. But again, keep in mind that these are only leaks and rumors and just different things. Most likely rumors, of course, so who knows if this is real or not. But we'll have to see when the final phone actually comes out to the market to see if this is real or not. Now let's actually go over to some news about iOS, because of course WWDC finally dropped, and WWDC is actually a pretty big deal. Of course, it is a conference where they only talk about updates to like software sides, so no hardware here at WWDC for Apple. It was all software. Sometimes they actually do reveal hardware at WWDC, but most of the time it's mostly software stuff on like iOS, Mac, and things like that. And that's pretty much what we got. We got a whole bunch of updates regarding iOS, iPadOS, macOS, the operating system for the Apple Watch and things like that. And in today's WWDC that just took place a couple weeks ago or last week, basically, they did actually finally announce iOS 14. And iOS 14 is actually a pretty big deal. Most of the time when it comes to these updates, I'm like, yeah, they're okay updates, but there's nothing really too big or too crazy that makes me want to cover some of these updates. But this one is a pretty big change for iOS as a whole, and I really do think a lot of people out there are going to be very excited about the future of iOS, and it's going to be interesting to see the way Apple finally treats iOS moving on in the future, like iOS 15, iOS 16, iOS 17, etc. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at iOS 14. Now, the biggest key takeaway from iOS 14 is the fact that they are going to be giving you more customization. You guys know, if you are on the Apple side, especially iOS, you don't have as much customization compared to other smartphones like Android smartphones. Android smartphones for the longest time pretty much gave you all the customization and all the freedom that you wanted out of your smartphone. If you're a person that like tinkering with your OS or like customizing your experience to your liking, that was always a dream of Android, and Apple was never one of those people that allowed you to do the customization you wanted on your smartphone, due probably to a number of different reasons. Apple is always a company that want to make sure that things flow nicely, work nicely, nothing gets buggy, glitchy. They want you to use their experiences. Overall, want a very nice experience. I can agree sometimes with Android. There can be problems when it comes to customization, adding launchers to your device. You don't know the compatibility. A lot of things can be just a little bit clunkier. But with iOS, they pretty much keep you in their bubble and in their operating system with not too much freedom, which pretty much helps iOS actually become as good as it is, because you don't have to worry about anything bogging down the system. But now you're going to be getting more freedom on iOS 14, and one of the biggest key features of iOS 14, of course, right out the gate, you can see from this home screen right here, is the fact that for the first time ever, you are going to be able to have widgets that are actually going to be on your home screens of iOS. And I think for a lot of people, that's actually going to be a big deal, because prior to this, I think you had widgets on iOS, but they weren't part of the home screen. They were on a separate page. So it's nice to finally have widgets on all your home screens. Unfortunately, you're not going to get all the customization in the world with this, just due to the fact that if you look at how they're actually implementing widgets into iOS, you're still going to have to put them in certain areas on your home screens. It's not going to allow you to resize them or put them anywhere you like, but just the fact that now they are coming to your home screens is going to be nice, and it will give you a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more freedom. And then you can also see things at a glance with widgets. And I actually think it's going to make the experience on iOS a lot more better, and just overall a lot more better. And I actually like this change to iOS, because I do think iOS does need some type of customization. It's actually funny too when we look at this design for iOS and how Apple is bringing widgets to iOS. It kind of seems like a lot of people are actually making fun of this, just due to the fact that if you look at what Android is doing, Android's had the most freedom and have already had widgets for pretty much since Android has been out, and now Apple is finally getting widgets. It's like, what are you talking about? We've already had widgets in Android for so long. This is not even a new feature. And I know if you're on the Android camp, you're probably laughing at this and laughing at Apple fans for actually getting this on their operating system. But honestly, I think there's no reason to make fun of them. And honestly, in my opinion, I think it's good for I think it's good for smartphone business. I also, honestly, if you ask me, think it's good for people who are on the Apple ecosystem. I also think it's good for people who are on the Android ecosystem, because maybe with new changes like this, people who previously were only stuck to Android just due to the fact that they had more customization may start wanting to go to things like iOS and the iPhone, just due to the fact that now we have widget supports, and it opens up the possibility to more customization in the near future with more iOS updates, just due to the fact that you can see Apple is willing to open up the experience much more greater than what they previously had. So there is possibilities for that, and overall I really do think it is a nice feature, and I think it's a win-win for each and every customer out there when it comes to the smartphone game. It's a win win-win for Apple customers. It's also a win-win for Android customers. I see this as a quality of life improvements to the iOS experience and to the iPhone. I also think that copying other OSs out there on the market is not necessarily a bad thing, because let's face it, iOS has taken a lot of features from Android in the past and moved them over to iOS. And then of course Android's probably copied some stuff that iOS has had in the past too. So of course it's always good for business that if everybody gets equality of life and everybody's happy, and overall it's just good. So I don't see why you'd actually complain about this. And I know I don't need to say anything about this like, oh, I told you that Android's better, or yeah, Android always had the customization. I'm actually happy for iOS fans who stick to iOS and all they know is iOS, because they're going to get more customization when iOS 14 actually rolls out. And iOS 14 is actually going to be rolling out in the near future. Of course, it's going to be probably coming around September when they announce the new iPhone 12 and things like that. So look forward to that. And then some other key things in iOS. I'm not going to cover everything. iOS 14, another key big thing is more freedom, and this one is actually pretty cool, is the fact that for the first time on iOS, which of course this one's also another Android feature, this one is actually going to be about picture-in-picture, because for the first time we are getting picture-in-picture on iOS. I'm pretty sure the iPad had picture-in-picture for a while now, so it's not the first iOS has actually had picture-in-picture, but we are getting picture-in-picture on the iPhone, and I actually think that's a very nice feature to have. So no longer are you tied down to certain applications that play video. If the application supports picture-in-picture, you'll be allowed to back out of the application, and then you'll be able to watch your video in a small box around the screen while you do other tasks on your smartphone, like web browse, message people, use other applications. And honestly, I think that's very good, which I'm actually pretty happy about, and it is nice to see that coming, because that is a quality of life thing, and it is nice you'll be able to watch a video or watch something informative if you have to do other things on your smartphone, and I'm actually all for that. And then another change is, which not a lot of people probably know this is a thing, because I don't think Apple officially announced this, but I do know there is a feature in iOS 14 which will allow you to map certain functions to the back of your phone. Basically, if you like double tap the back of your phone or triple tap the back of the phone, you can get certain functions to actually happen on your phone, like maybe, for instance, open a web browser if you double tap the back of your phone, open the camera, and things like that. And honestly, I think that's a very cool thing, because that can actually be pretty useful if you ask me, because that can actually be quality of life, especially if you're in a situation where you need to do something super fast. Just double tapping the back or triple tapping the back of your phone would actually be very nice. And then another feature they did happen to copy over from Android is the fact that iOS is now actually going to get an app drawer for the first time. If you swipe all the way to the end of your I think apps or app screens, you will get something called, I forgot the name of it actually. Now that I actually think about it, it's something called the app something. Oh, App Library. I guess it's called App Library. So basically, App Library just pretty much categorizes all your applications from all your home screens into one nice categories list, so you can actually see these. And then you also got an apps drawer where you can browse your apps from A to Z. It puts it in order, and you can scroll through them pretty nicely, and that is nice. And the nice thing about the app library is, for the first time in iOS, you can finally remove unwanted home screens. So you can just remove every single application you no longer want to see that's cluttering up space and things like that. And I think that is a really nice improvement to the iOS experience, just due to the fact that if you look at what iOS has been known to do, iOS has been known to clutter your device up, just because a lot of people have too many home screens with unwanted applications they either had to use or they didn't use but couldn't uninstall them for certain reasons. So it is nice now you can just unremove those applications if you don't want multiple home screens and you just want to see them in all one place, the app library. So that's actually a very nice feature as well. And overall, iOS 14 does seem like a pretty nice improvement over iOS 13, with widgets, the app library, the gestures on the back, and picture-in-picture. Overall, it's shaping up to be one of the greatest improvements of iOS. And then, of course, talking talking a little things, one nice thing is they did really go over on this iOS update, iOS 14 update, is the fact that a lot of things won't take up your whole screen now when you actually activate them. Like for instance, Siri, when you activated Siri on iOS, it used to take up your whole screen. When you said like, hey Siri, it would just pretty much black out your whole screen and pretty much just go to Siri, making your device unusable until you stop using Siri. But now you can finally use Siri without actually having to have it take up all your screen real estate. It'll just come up in a small little bubble at the bottom of the screen, and then you can keep doing what you're doing on the screen or keep seeing what you're seeing on the screen. Same thing with phone calls and things like that. And I think that's actually a really great thing. Again, Android has that for quite some time now. It's not a new feature, but it is one of the greatest features they could have done. Something that won't be intrusive and really like take you out of the experience. If you're using Siri or if someone calls you, why would you want it to take you out of your experience? Let's say you're watching a video or web browsing and then someone calls you. Why do you want it interrupting your whole screen? I know why they did that, so that if it's an important phone call, the phone call would be front and center and you would actually remember that the phone call is there. But a lot of times it was distracting. It just didn't make sense, and a lot of people had a ringtone anyway, so what's the point of that when you actually have a ringtone to begin with? It's kind of like there is no point of actually interrupting what you're doing on the screen when you already have a ringtone anyway, and most people can see a little like notification pop up anyway. That would actually be the better solution there. So that's actually nice that they are actually doing that. And then another thing they're doing here, as you can see, is they are going to be doing snippets of applications. So if you hold your phone up to certain objects in real life, you'll be able to use certain parts of applications that you do not have installed on your iPhone. So basically you can use applications without installing them. You can use certain parts of them, and honestly this is pretty cool. It's going to be hit or miss depending on what you actually want to do. And that pretty much wraps up iOS 14. I'm sure I missed something, but yeah, let's go ahead and actually move on to some gaming, because I haven't actually talked too much about gaming in this episode. Now let's talk about the reveal of Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time, and I do know it's about time for me to do this talk about, because I haven't talked about this yet since this came out. And I know this is old news, but I have to personally cover it just due to the fact that I grew up with Crash Bandicoot. I played all the Crash Bandicoot trilogies. I played the Crash racing games. I played Crash Bash, which is a Mario Party spin-off. So you can see I pretty much played everything Crash Bandicoot. I even played the remakes that came out of the Crash trilogy, and also the CTR remake that actually came out as well last year. So let's go over here and actually talk about Crash Bandicoot 4. So here is Crash Bandicoot 4. Let's actually go ahead and go to the article right now. So here is Crash Bandicoot 4 right here. I'm not actually going to show any gameplay due to copyright infringement and things like that. Unfortunately, I don't want to get this copyright strike, so I'm not sure about that. But let's talk about Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time. Most likely you may have already heard about the recent news of Crash Bandicoot 4. Keep in mind, this is not the original developer that is making Crash Bandicoot 4. It is actually going to be another developer. It's actually the same developer, I do believe, that did the remakes of Spyro, and I think they worked a little bit on the Crash remake as well. It is called Toys for Bob. Toys for Bob is making this, I do believe, and then on top of that, Activision is publishing this game. And even though this is called Crash Bandicoot 4, keep in mind this is actually not Crash Bandicoot 4. In a sense, it is Crash Bandicoot 4, but in another sense, it's not Crash Bandicoot 4, and let me explain why. First of all, the reason it's not Crash Bandicoot 4 is the fact that they've had more than 4 games, and they do, I'm pretty sure, make a little joke about it at the end of the gameplay of Crash Bandicoot 4. But the reason it is Crash Bandicoot 4 is due to the fact that outside of the Crash trilogy, they never officially called any of the other games on the PS2 or any other platform actually Crash Bandicoot 4. So that's why they're calling this Crash Bandicoot 4, and they're going to be calling it It's About Time, because so many people wanted a true, I guess, sequel to the original trilogy made by Naughty Dog. And honestly, I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on this right now. Overall, I'm actually very happy about Crash Bandicoot 4. It's About Time. When I first saw this leaked out, I was pretty uncertain about the future of Crash because you guys know outside of the Crash trilogy, a lot of them are hit or miss. I would say for me personally and for a lot of people out there, I think a lot of people feel the same way about Crash. I think a lot of people feel that Crash after the trilogy really went downhill, but that's due to the fact that the games didn't really play too much like the original trilogy. It wasn't by Naughty Dog, and overall it just had a lot of different elements going towards it, and I think overall they were very disappointing games. We can all agree the Crash trilogy was the best games for the Crash series, and that's how Crash was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a 2.5D platformer. It wasn't supposed to really be a 3D platformer or anything else or anything with weird mechanics. It's strictly a platformer, to be honest. The reason I was so uncertain about the state of Crash Bandicoot 4 when I saw the review, when I saw the leak leaked out, was just due to the fact that Crash looks a little bit different, and it looked like it was just a big joke because, like I said before, Crash has gotten so many bad games in the past. I was like, yeah, it's probably going to be another joke and another bad game. But what happened when they finally revealed this game for the first time, I think, last week or so, I was actually pretty surprised by how good Crash Bandicoot 4 looked, and it really looks like they're returning to form, and they're really going to give fans what they actually deserve with Crash Bandicoot 4. We are pretty much going to be getting more Crash, whether you like it or hate it, but actually, we are going to be getting more elements. We're going to be getting things like going upside down in the gameplay, freezing time. We are going to get more masks outside of Uka Uka. Overall, it just seems like it's going to be a fan service game. If you like the original trilogy game, most likely you're going to like this game. I can't say anything bad about this game. Of course, we haven't really seen too much of this game, but from what we've seen so far, I really do think Crash Bandicoot 4 is going to live up to the name, and I really do think fans of the trilogy are going to get a game that they actually deserve. I really do think Toys for Bob actually knows what they're doing when it actually comes to the trilogy of Crash, and I really do think they are going to give this game the proper next game in the series, and I really do think this is going to be a good game. Now, this game is not stated to come out until October 2020, and it's actually interesting. This game is going to be on PS4 and Xbox One. As far as I know right now, there is no confirmation of a next-gen game, so we're not getting this on PS5 or Xbox Series X. We're also not going to be getting a Switch port, and we're also not going to be getting a PC port at this current time. Of course, you guys know what happened with the licensing and things like that. It's likely that we'll get a Switch version of this game, and of course we'll get a PC version of this game. And a lot of people may be asking, why are we actually getting this game on PS4 and Xbox One when October is pretty close to the release of the next generation of consoles? The reason being most likely is due to the fact that if you look at how this game was made to be, most likely this game has been in development for quite some time. And if this game was in development for quite some time, most likely they had no release date for the PS5 and Xbox Series X. They didn't know when those systems were coming out, and they were already building the code based around the current gen consoles, so it makes sense that they would actually want to port these games put these games on the PS4 and the Xbox One. It really does make sense if you actually think about it. So that's probably why they actually did that in the first place. And I'm not really too mad about it because they can always port this over at a later date, and we already have consoles like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X that plays games at 1440p, 4K, and things like that. So most likely this game's gonna look amazing and play pretty good. We'll obviously have to wait and see until this game comes out how well this game is actually going to be, because who knows, after we play this game it may be a disappointing game, but it looks like it's going to be one heck of a time. And for the first time too, it really looks like they're really doing a good job of it, because you'll be able to play as things like Dr. Cortex. Dr. Cortex is actually going to be a playable character here. Overall, so far a very good game. Now the next topic on this video is going to be about Adobe Flash. It looks like Adobe Flash is finally coming to its death, and Adobe Flash, according to this article, says Adobe wants all users to uninstall Adobe Flash by the end of the year, so the end of 2020. And I really do think personally it is about time that Adobe finally actually cut support for Adobe Flash, because let's face it, Adobe Flash has been dead for quite some time. Not too many people actually use Adobe Flash. Honestly, I'm actually personally glad Adobe Flash is finally dying. I don't think Adobe Flash deserves to be on the internet. There's just so many problems with Adobe Flash. It's not really a good plugin. A lot of times too, if you ever used Adobe Flash, you had to have a plugin for your web browser, and a lot of times it was just a big hassle. It wasn't a good experience. It was a buggy experience. It was kind of a laggy experience, and especially if you were on mobile, it never ran right in the first place, and it wasn't optimized for the mobile landscape of any circumstance, whether you're on iOS or Android. It just wasn't a good plugin and wasn't a good thing. And you may have never used Flash, but if you grew up, like for instance, in the 90s or in the early 2000s, most likely you did use Flash. And the number one main thing you would use Flash for back in those days was, of course, games. They had a lot of Flash sites, Flash sites on the internet that actually used Adobe Flash, and I was one of those people that really did use Adobe Flash, and what I can say is I didn't like the experience at all. I actually used two websites heavily when I was bored on the internet. One of them was a website called Miniclips. I used Miniclips for so many years, and then another one I used was ABC Arcade. ABC Arcade was definitely another place where you can actually go to play just Flash games, but in so Flash games weren't all that good. They were kind of kiddie, they were kind of arcadey overall. They just weren't good. I just really hated the fact that the plugins for Flash you had to install separately to your web browser. They weren't embedded, and a lot of times, sometimes even the game still wouldn't recognize Flash after you installed Flash. At least in my experience, and overall, I did not like the Flash player at all most of the time, because it just was buggy and overall had a lot of problems. And it looks like Adobe wants you to update all your websites that still use Flash. If you're still using Flash, they're discontinuing it most likely, and I am glad for that, because it means that the quality of life for the internet is actually going to be getting better in the future, of course. And I am glad HTML5, I do believe, is going to be replacing this. And that one, there's pretty much no problems with that. I think most modern websites already use that. If you look at like Facebook, if you look at YouTube, they already have that embedded in their websites, and it pretty much makes a better, cleaner experience for the end user and for the people browsing the internet. So yes, finally it's about time for this thing to die. Honestly, I wish this thing just never existed in the first place, and this thing should have died a very long time ago, honestly, because I just think it's really not a good plugin for the internet. But what I can say is, even though this thing was buggy, glitchy, it just wasn't that good, it was kind of clunky, all I can say is it did work when it wanted to work, and it did work fairly good, and it did have a lot of memories playing all those old Flash websites like Miniclips, ABC Arcade, other websites that embedded Adobe Flash. But I am glad this thing needs to die. So apparently what happens is, if your website's not updated by the end of the year, you're just pretty much out of luck, and all your content is going to be dead if you still use Adobe Flash on all of your websites. And yeah, I think that's pretty much going to end this video and call this episode done. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.